Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. New York City passes a major bill now headed to the mayor. The sanctuary city now one step closer to expanding voting rights to non-citizens. The jury rules that actor Jussie Smollett staged a fake attack on himself, then lied to Chicago police about it. The actor faces charges of disorderly conduct. The FDA is expanding the Pfizer booster shot to people aged 16 and 17. This while 2 states are calling in their National Guardsmen to deal with staffing shortages at hospitals over vaccine mandates. Airlines have raised their fees for checked bags and schedule changes, but some lawmakers say the increases are unreasonable. So they've introduced a bill to have the federal government regulate those fees. In San Francisco, drug overdose is a much bigger problem than the virus. Last year, there were more than twice as many overdose deaths than deaths from COVID. New York City's just one step away from giving non-citizens the right to vote in local elections. Today, the City Council passed the bill. Now, the mayor's got to make a choice. NTD's Miguel Moreno reports from Manhattan.
New York City prides itself as a sanctuary city for immigrants. Now off to the mayor's desk is a bill that the city's talked about for years, a bill that would give non-citizens the right to vote in local elections. Mayor Bill de Blasio, a self-described progressive, has his reservations.
Ari, right now, I still have very mixed feelings about it. I've been honest about that. That hasn't changed a bit. I think there are still some outstanding legal questions about the city's authority versus the states in this matter. But I respect the city council.
According to several reports, de Blasio has confirmed that he won't veto the bill. The mayor, city council members, and other city officials may soon have hundreds of thousands of additional voters to win over. Democratic City Council member Idanis Rodriguez, architect of the bill, says 800,000 additional residents would be able to cast ballots. Only lawful permanent residents like green card holders and residents authorized to work would be able to vote if the mayor signs this bill into law. So proponents say these immigrants work and pay taxes but aren't allowed to vote, which in their view isn't right. But opponents say this bill devalues the voting rights citizens have by endowing non-citizens with that same right. Opponents also accuse Democrats of trying to expand their voter base by passing this bill. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
The jury has reached a verdict in the trial for actor Jussie Smollett. They ruled that he orchestrated a fake attack on himself and then lied to Chicago police about it. The jury deliberated the verdict for about 8 hours yesterday and today. Smollett was convicted of 5 charges but acquitted in 1 count. 2 brothers testified that Smollett recruited them to fake the attack near his home in downtown Chicago in January 2019. They said the actor had asked them to put a noose around his neck, yell racist and homophobic slurs, and rough him up in view of a surveillance camera. Smollett denies saying he was the victim of a real hate crime. Experts say Smollett will likely be placed on probation and ordered to perform community service. And the FDA's expanded Pfizer's booster shots once again. Now 16 to 17-year-olds can line up to get boosted. The agency gave Pfizer's 3rd dose an emergency use authorization, so as of now, it's not fully approved but available to this group if it's been 6 months since their last shot. FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock said vaccines remain the most effective tool for fighting the virus. Others, such as the WHO, oppose boosters, saying countries should focus on initial vaccinations, and that initial doses still prevent severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And Maine is down hundreds, and New York is down thousands of healthcare workers due to vaccine mandates. Now the 2 states are calling on the National Guard to help ease the staffing shortages. NTD's Grace Coulter has the details.
Maine has lost hundreds of nurses and healthcare workers due to the state's vaccine mandate, now facing a major worker shortage. Maine's Governor Janet Mills announced Wednesday she's activating the National Guard to assist in hospitals. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to block Mills' COVID-19 vaccine mandate back in October. Maine hospital systems told news outlets this resulted in hundreds of workers quitting or being fired. According to the state's healthcare executives, COVID-19 infections among staff and a national shortage of qualified workers have also contributed to the shortage. The CEO of Maine Health told reporters, "Our nation's lost over 500,000 healthcare workers who resigned, retired, or left the field in the last several months. And so there's a huge workforce crisis in our country." Up to 75 National Guard members will be deployed next week and will assist until the end of January. Also on Wednesday, the New York National Guard announced 120 Army medics and Air Force medical technicians have been deployed to ease staffing shortages. They're assisting in 12 long-term care facilities and nursing homes across the state. Governor Kathy Hochul ordered the mission on December 1st. Thousands of New York healthcare workers have lost their jobs or been placed on leave due to the state's vaccine mandate. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
The Labor Department says claims for unemployment benefits have dropped to a new low. Today, the department released its weekly jobless claims report. It found 184,000 claims for benefits were made in the week ending December 4th. The government says this is the lowest level in 52 years. Meanwhile, as of October, the nation had 11 million jobs available and not enough people to fill them. And airline fees for baggage and schedule changes have gone up quite a bit in the past few years. Now, lawmakers are pushing a bill to regulate airline fees to make sure they don't grow too much. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more.
U.S. airlines are collecting 5 times as much revenue from fees compared to a decade ago. In 2019, they raked in nearly $110 billion. That's up from $22 billion in 2010.
That's right. Before 2008, checking a bag was free. Remember those days? Now, $35 for the first bag and $45 for the second bag.
With hopes of putting an end to these rising fees, Democrat members in the House and in the Senate are introducing the Fair Fees Act. It would prohibit airlines from charging what they call unreasonably high fees for basic services like bags and schedule changes.
How do they get away with it? They can because they have near monopolistic power over the routes that they run.
The congressmen say to solve this, more government regulation and oversight is needed. And one part of these regulations that they're proposing would be to make sure that the fees are proportionate to the services being provided. We asked, how would they determine the baseline, the maximum amount that these fees can be? And they said this would be at the discretion of the Department of Transportation.
We're going to give to the Department of Transportation the power to be able to determine what is reasonable. Right now, everyone in our country knows it's unreasonable.
But how likely is it that the Fair Fees Act would pass and be signed by President Biden? Markey tells us the last time he introduced the bill, there was a Republican co-sponsor, Senator Roger Wicker. But this time, they have not yet secured any Republican sponsors so far. Markey tells us it's a bipartisan issue, so he's confident it will gain more support. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And a few updates after the tragic Michigan school shooting that left 4 dead and 7 injured. Riley France was shot in the neck during the Oxford High School shooting. Today, her parents have filed 2 $100 million lawsuits against the Michigan School District. Authorities say that the deadly school shooting was entirely preventable. The lawsuits fault the school district's superintendent and school principal for assuring the parents of the school's safety. This despite knowing of disturbing social media posts and an online ammunition search by the accused shooter, Ethan Crumbley. Also, following the shooting, Michigan Democrats are proposing a magazine limit. They hope to pass a bill that would prohibit the sale or possession of a magazine that can hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition. And drug overdoses in San Francisco, California have become an epidemic. The number of overdose deaths nearly tripled that of COVID deaths last year. NTD's Eileen Ang hears more from a San Francisco native.
San Francisco has a much bigger problem than COVID.
Bad is an understatement. I would say it is horrific. It is negligent. It is an epidemic in and of itself. And it was not always this way.
Jenny Xiao, a San Francisco native, says drug overdoses have gotten much worse within the last 5 years.
Before, you were able to walk through the streets regardless of what neighborhood you were in, and you did not have to try and tiptoe over bodies, not knowing whether they were dead or alive. And also, you did not have to hopscotch through anything like drug paraphernalia, including needles. And you were not literally walking through a scene of, say, the Night of the Living Dead.
The city's data reveals there were 713 overdose deaths compared to 261 COVID-19 deaths in 2020. In July, San Francisco Mayor London Breed announced the city will invest $13.2 million to prevent drug overdose. Recently, city officials are pushing for safe injection sites as part of their overdose prevention program, which could start as soon as next spring. But according to Xiao, that's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem and fast-tracking a way to self-destruction.
The idea is sobriety, and that's the golden key. You do not want to be dependent on these drugs. And from what I understand of these harm reduction sites, as the city likes to call them, is that you are putting yourself at less risk of, say, overdose or harm. But nevertheless, you are still locked in that state of constantly abusing yourself and, so to speak, teetering on the border of death.
Xiao says the city needs to invest in more mental health programs. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Leaders of the free world are meeting virtually today and tomorrow for the Summit for Democracy, hosted by the U.S. Washington says it's rallying nations against rising authoritarian rule. NTD's Jessica Beatty has the details.
President Biden kicked off the virtual Summit for Democracy Thursday morning with over 100 world leaders.
Democracy doesn't happen by accident. We have to renew it with each generation. And this is an urgent matter on all our parts, in my view.
Washington says it hopes the two-day summit will be a boost for global democracy, threatened by an increase in authoritarian rulers. The State Department's top official for democracy says the event comes at a critical time.
Make no mistake, we're at a moment of democratic reckoning, when the greatest challenges we face cross borders, regions, and domains of expertise.
Earlier this year, Biden said he'd face down authoritarian forces led by China and Russia. Neither country was invited to the summit.
The aim should be to strengthen our voice and our efforts to counter the advancing autocracies like China, Russia, and other autocrats.
U.S. officials promising a year of action will follow. Earlier this week, Biden threatened economic sanctions against Russia to dissuade it from invading Ukraine. And American diplomats have committed to boycott next year's Winter Olympic Games in China over the regime's human rights abuses. The House also voting Wednesday to ban all goods from China's Xinjiang region over concerns about forced labor. It passed by an overwhelming 428-1. Despite concerns about the state of American democracy, the founder of Alliance of Democracies Foundation remains optimistic.
I consider the American democracy quite strong, quite resilient. I still consider America the shining city on the hill.
The director of the nonprofit Freedom House says the event has the potential to push struggling democracies to do better. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Democratic Senator Ed Markey tells NTD the U.S. has a responsibility, not just as the economic and military leader, but as the moral leader of the world, to shine a spotlight on human rights violations. This comes amid a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics and President Biden's Democracy Summit. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
The White House on Monday announced a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, meaning the U.S. won't send officials to the Games next February. Senator Ed Markey tells NTD a diplomatic boycott can draw international attention to human rights abuses in China.
And that's in large part because of what is being inflicted upon the Uyghurs. It's a statement about American human rights and how important it is for us to have our voice be heard and to shine a spotlight on what the Chinese are doing through our diplomatic boycott. The whole world then pays more attention to what is happening to these oppressed people.
Reports show that the Chinese Communist regime has arbitrarily detained over 1 million Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang region. Detainees say they experience forced labor, forced sterilization, and systematic abuse. A number of clothing brands this year have cut cotton supply from Xinjiang over concerns of forced labor. The senator explains what he thinks the U.S. can do.
It would be to really ensure that there is accountability, that we're taking note of the exploitation of Uyghur workers, and that we're not going to be willing conspirators in this effort to in any way oppress the Uyghurs. And we're just going to separate ourselves from anything that the Chinese are doing in terms of the products which are created. We don't need them being sold, and we won't allow them to be sold to American consumers.
The senator says it's important for the U.S. to shine a spotlight on every human rights violation, whether it be religious persecution, forced labor, or forced organ harvesting, all of which are taking place in communist China. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Late Senator and war veteran Bob Dole now lies in state at the U.S. Capitol. President Biden delivered remarks there today, saying Dole was one of the country's greatest patriots. NTD's Miguel Moreno reports.
Up the steps of the U.S. Capitol, a casket containing the body of late Senator Bob Dole heads to the building's rotunda. There to lie in state, as have the notable and renowned before him. Dole served 36 years in the House and Senate as a Republican. His wife, Elizabeth, also a former senator, attended the memorial service. Dole's longtime Democratic opponent, President Joe Biden, spoke highly of the man, but opened his remarks with a lighthearted introduction.
He did have great wit. They once asked him, why in God's name did he vote to continue to fund Amtrak? He said because if he didn't, Biden would stay overnight and cause more trouble.
He then gave Dole, a decorated Vietnam veteran, an exceptional designation.
America has lost one of our greatest patriots. We may follow his wisdom, I hope, and his timeless truth. But the truth of the matter is, as divided as we are, the only way forward for democracy is unity.
Dole's last opinion article, published after his death by the Washington Post, proclaims a similar message of unity. He said, when we prioritize principles over party and humanity over personal legacy, we accomplish far more as a nation. By leading with a shared faith in each other, we become America at its best. The 98-year-old died in his sleep on Sunday. Earlier this year, Dole had been diagnosed with lung cancer. He is the 33rd person to receive the honor of lying in state at the Capitol. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Coming up, the race for New York governor has one fewer candidate. Letitia James says she has to finish her job as the state's attorney general. And the NYPD seizes a heap of illegal weapons. The latest stockpile includes 25 ghost guns and almost 700 rounds of ammunition. That and more on NTD News. New York Attorney General Letitia James is no longer running for governor. She suspended her campaign today, saying she will run for re-election as Attorney General.
Letitia James says she must continue her work as Attorney General. She writes in a statement, "There are a number of important investigations and cases that are underway, and I intend to finish the job. I am running for re-election to complete the work New Yorkers elected me to do." So far, 3 Democrats have declared they're also running for New York Attorney General next year. Fordham Law professor Zephyr Teachout, former congressional lawyer Daniel Goldman, and State Assembly member Clyde Vannell. And the governor's race is now left with 3 Democratic and 3 Republican candidates. On the Democrat side, there's the current governor, Kathy Hochul, Congressman Tom Suozzi, and the New York City public advocate Jumaane Williams. On the Republican side, there's Rob Astorino, Andrew Giuliani, and Congressman Lee Zeldin.
The New York City Police Department arrested a 20-year-old male in Queens with a stockpile of illegal weapons, including dozens of ghost guns and ammunition. The Queens District Attorney says this is the 5th ghost gun bust in Queens since August. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
I'm here right outside of the Queens DA office. They recently teamed up with the NYPD intelligence team to catch another person with a stockpile of ghost guns. So what is a ghost gun? Someone basically buys the gun pieces online and then they put the gun together to make a ghost gun. And it's not traceable because it doesn't have a serial number.
Investigators were conducting an ongoing surveillance of the defendant, who has allegedly been buying firearm parts online, having them delivered to his apartment. Early yesterday morning, they executed a search warrant and recovered the following. In front of you are 25 ghost guns, including 19 semi-automatic pistols, 5 assault weapons, 1 semi-automatic shotgun.
The suspect also allegedly possessed a ghost AR-15 with a silencer. Katz wants to continue to catch people who make ghost guns to help keep the streets of New York City safe.
These lethal firearms were allegedly being manufactured and kept on the first floor of an apartment in a large building complex with dozens of residents, and there was still more to complete when we found them. The defendant does not have a license to possess or own firearms in the city of New York. He faces up to 25 years in prison if convicted.
Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz is hoping to help solve this problem of ghost guns by getting serial numbers put on each individual part of the gun. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
New York City schools have some of the largest class sizes in the state. Today, parents and teachers demonstrated in support of a bill that could change this. NTD's Chenny Wu hears from some parents at the event.
I'm here in downtown Manhattan near City Hall. Parents in the city's largest teachers union are calling on the New York City Council to vote on a bill that will reduce class sizes in school.
Isn't it about time the children of New York City have the same size classes as the rest of the children in this state?
My kids are going to school in classrooms with more than 30 kids in it.
The bill proposes to increase the minimal square footage per student from 28 to 35. That means the average elementary school classroom would have no more than 20 children, and high school classrooms no more than 26. Parents at the event say their children got a taste of smaller classes during the pandemic.
Because we had so many children learning remotely, the children that were in school actually got a different kind of education because teachers were able to devote more time to them.
My one daughter, for the first time in 10 years, said, "I am awesome at math." That never came out of her mouth. And I can't tell you as a parent how happy that makes me, because she never felt good about herself. I asked her, I said, "What's changed?" She said, "I spend more time with my teachers. I have a smaller group of kids learning that are like me."
If the bill passes, it's estimated an additional 2,000 teachers would have to be hired annually over the next 5 years at a cost of about $200 million per year. The bill is already sponsored by 41 out of 51 council members. Chenny Wu, NTD News.
Many people have a cup of coffee every morning, and the price of coffee has doubled since last year, but it's not because of inflation. And even if you have a cup every day, the price hike might not really affect you. NTD's Arian Pazdar has why.
I just paid around $4 for this cup of coffee. But last year, when coffee beans were still half the price they are now, I paid the same amount for a cup of coffee. And that's because, for the most part, you're actually not paying for the coffee beans when you buy a cup. If you pay $3.15 for a cup of coffee, only about 12 cents of that are for the beans, as this graphic created by a Twitter user shows. Businesses have many costs to cover, such as rent and staff wages, which add to the price of your coffee. Selena is the director of coffee for East One Coffee Roasters in Manhattan. She says the price for your cup might still go up because it takes time for the expensive beans to get to the US. So how much more will you have to pay?
Probably in the 10% range.
Two reasons why the price for coffee beans is so high at the moment are weather conditions in South America and civil unrest in Africa, both of which affect the crop.
Additionally, there's a huge supply chain interruption, so it's very difficult to ship coffee out of the countries where it's grown right now.
She added that consumers might feel the price increase sometime next year. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
Baristas at one of Starbucks cafes in upstate New York have voted to unionize. Starbucks tried persuading them not to, saying a union would become a wedge between employee and employer. But today, about 2/3 of workers at a cafe in Buffalo rejected those calls in favor of banding together. Pro-union workers campaigned on the idea staff could better negotiate with Starbucks through a union. And if that's the case, it could have been a triple whammy for Starbucks, as votes are counted at 2 other Buffalo locations. But results just in show one of those cafes has chosen not to unionize. The workers were organized by an outside group called the Workers United Upstate New York. Starbucks tried to counter the group's efforts by boosting pay and even sending top executives to Buffalo to meet with staff, but to no avail, it seems. Starbucks had said it will accept the result of the vote. And supply chain chaos is affecting the chemical industry. Urea, a key ingredient in agricultural fertilizer, and diesel fuel is skyrocketing in price due to disruptions in the global supply. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has the details.
A shortage of the chemical urea has led to prices skyrocketing. Prices have risen over 70% this year, as urea futures have surged on high coal prices and concerns over low energy supplies. China and Russia, the world's biggest producers of urea, have restricted exports to ensure supplies for domestic consumption. This is forcing other countries to find alternative suppliers. According to the World Bank, China accounts for about 1/10 of the world's urea-based fertilizer exports. As the price of fuel and fertilizer began rising this year, the Chinese regime sent billions of dollars in subsidies and other support for domestic farmers and ordered a de facto ban on fertilizer exports through early 2022. South Korea, which heavily relies on urea exports from China, is facing critical shortages. Urea is used to reduce diesel vehicle and industrial emissions, and South Korea doesn't allow diesel engines to run without it. So truck drivers face a risk of unemployment. In India, farmers are also fearing for their livelihoods. Fertilizer shortages have led to farmers rioting outside of government distribution centers, as well as clashes with police. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Coming up, a Bay Area teenager was arrested after hitting a police officer in the face. Local residents share their views on the incident. And Silicon Valley officials want to preserve agriculture in the valley. They're trying to protect farmland and make it easier for farmers to own their land. More soon here on NTD News.
See China before communism. Behold a splendid culture reborn, filled with beauty, majesty, and a powerful message of hope. Come see the performance that has touched the hearts of millions. Live on stage. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. you go. Never gonna let
San Mateo police arrested 2 teenagers for threatening local residents. One of the teens struck an officer in the face. We spoke to locals to hear their response.
A teenager hit a police officer's face on Wednesday night while responding to threats of violence towards local residents. The unnamed 17-year-old male struck the officer after refusing to comply. Police arrested the teenager and an accompanying 18-year-old. Locals responded to the assault.
In my opinion, if he made the choice to punch the police officer without being attacked, then he made a bad choice. If the minor did assault the police officer, you got to man up and you got to take responsibility for your actions.
If they're doing bad things, I mean, they have to pay for it.
His brain isn't even fully developed yet. How's his living situation? Who are his role models? That's the deeper root problem, is who's influencing this kid.
Why did the minor, the 17-year-old, punch the police officer in the face? Are they thinking that they can get away with it because they're a minor and they won't be charged legally as to the degree that an adult would?
I don't agree that an 18-year-old's mind is fully developed. It all depends on the individual, Like I said, their background, what they've been through, how they were raised.
The San Mateo police said the 18-year-old was sent to the county jail and the 17-year-old to juvenile hall. The 17-year-old may be released if a judicial officer does not meet with him for a detention hearing within a certain period.
A piece of farmland in Silicon Valley is being preserved. The city and local farmers want to keep the land for agriculture instead of urban development. NTD's David Lamb spoke to a farmer.
Coyote Valley consists of 7,400 acres of land in Silicon Valley. Officials, the Open Space Authority, and a local farmer spoke at a news conference Thursday morning.
And Coyote Valley provides irreplaceable benefits to nature and people. Wildlife connectivity, improved water quality and groundwater recharge.
Santa Clara County wants to preserve agriculture to give farmers from diverse backgrounds the opportunity to purchase affordable farmland from landowners.
They find it harder and harder to have access to ownership of the land that they work to cultivate.
A representative with the Open Space Authority told us not a lot of people in Silicon Valley know about the Coyote Valley land and the open space here. Now we spoke to a farmer who told us he's been cultivating this land for 20 years.
Right now we only have 3 workers, plus my wife and 2 kids who help when they can. Over there we plant 4-way, and the one across is wheat, and the one on the back is oats. So that's mainly what we're doing right now.
Gayton says he works on about 200 acres of land, and there's not much activity this time of the year because of the rain, but he can have up to 6 workers in the summertime.
I think being a farmer needs to be in your blood, because that's what it is, because if it's not in your blood, I think you'll quit the next year or less.
He says he can keep the family going and help provide crops to the county. He prefers to do business locally.
Oh yeah, we really enjoy it every day, When you get up and you're happy to feed the animals and, try to take care of your farm. It's very good.
Next Tuesday, the county supervisors plan to vote on preserving the land and resources by working with conservation groups and the city of San Jose. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
A conservation group in San Francisco is aiming to buy about 3,100 acres of remote California coastal land. This would protect it from possible logging and reserve it for public use. NTD's Jason Blair has more.
Save the Redwoods League, a nonprofit group in San Francisco, announced its plans to purchase 3,184 acres of remote land in California. Their goal is to save it from logging and potentially have it available for public use in the future.
The League is committed to raising the funds to acquire this property and to make sure that the forest is protected.
The property is being sold for $37 million by Superco, a family-owned logging company that's leaving the industry. The company's executive chairman, Eric Stark, told Fox, "You'd be hard-pressed to find 5 miles of coastline for sale without going to a third-world country."
It was up for auction, it is going to be sold, and it will either go the direction of conservation so that the forest can grow old again and the coastal landscape can be protected for all of us, or it will go into commercial management, and it would be harvested.
The property runs about 5 miles along the Northern California coastline, approximately 155 miles north of San Francisco. The league's deadline for raising the funds is December 31st. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
The CEO of Better.com has apologized for laying off hundreds of employees over a Zoom call last week. NTD's Faye Quarter has more on what he has to say and what happened.
The CEO of Better.com has apologized after his mass Zoom layoff made headlines worldwide.
And yet there's more.
Former employee Christian Chapman said it was the craziest layoff he's ever seen.
It was like the air got sucked out of the room. I mean, it was like being just kicked in the gut. It was very cold. It was very callous. It was very calculated.
Chapman, the father of 5 children, says all company devices and apps quickly stopped operating after the meeting.
And so as the reality set in, all of a sudden, everything goes blank remotely. Everything shut down. My laptop shut down. My Slack shut down. My Slack on my phone is shut down. I have no way to contact anybody. Any of my support structures, my community, my relationship, really my family is what my coworkers had become. I didn't have any way to contact them.
CEO Vishal Garg later issued a letter saying, "I want to apologize for the way I handled the layoffs," adding that he blundered the execution. Evan Neerman is the CEO of PR crisis management firm Red Banyan. Neerman says any other method would have been better than what Garg did.
A better way would have been rolling this out over an extended period and giving people the opportunity to hear directly from their managers, doing it with more private face-to-face discussions, whether in person or via Zoom, rolling it out over time, explaining it with a degree of transparency.
Garg had laid off around 900 Better.com employees over a 3-minute Zoom call in early December, around 15% of the workforce. Better.com is a U.S.-based company that provides home ownership services. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
Coming up, more countries are joining a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. The regime seems uneasy. Its foreign ministry is accusing boycotting countries of politicizing the games. Domestically, the regime says they don't care. Members of China's Communist Party have a personal obligation to have 3 kids. That's according to a state media editorial requiring party members to help boost the country's birth rate and relieve its population crisis. The article has gone viral and is causing strong pushback. That and more on NTD News. More countries are joining the diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. On the one hand, China is sharply criticizing these countries, threatening that they will pay a price for their actions. But on the other hand, Beijing also says it doesn't care. And an Australian senator is calling Beijing's reaction childish. Let's take a look.
In Europe, France and Germany say they need to take a united front toward Beijing, related to a diplomatic boycott of 2022 Winter Olympics.
We are in favor of a common position. We will see what is at stake during the next foreign ministers meeting or the next one. But this question needs to be dealt with as Europeans.
Top foreign policy officials from both nations met in Paris Thursday for a joint news conference. France's foreign affairs minister and Germany's foreign minister both agreed the nations should be on the same page. That followed remarks from French Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanqui, who said France would not join the U.S. boycott against Beijing. Germany's new foreign minister says a final decision will be made after further discussion, but she added that Germany will always be in agreement with its European friends. She also called for the EU to adopt a joint stance. Just one day before, International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach championed what he described as political neutrality.
The presence of government officials is a purely political decision for each government. And also for this political decision, the principle of the political neutrality of the IOC applies.
That comment came after the UK and Canada joined the diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, following the US, Australia, and New Zealand. China responded with apparent aggression on Thursday. Its foreign ministry warned that Australia, the UK, and the US will pay a price for their so-called mistaken acts. The ministry also referred to the boycott as political manipulation, using the Olympics as a platform. But Beijing seems to be sending mixed signals, as it has also said it doesn't care whether foreign officials will attend. One Australian senator drew attention to the contradiction, pointing out that it's like somebody saying, "I'm not going to come to your birthday party," and then you respond by saying, "Well, I wasn't going to invite you anyway." He called China's response childish and said it once again puts Chinese diplomacy in a very poor light.
And looking at China's retail sector, Walmart shuttered 4 stores across the country in just one day. The closures follow a larger pattern, as the shopping giant has shut down a total of 80 stores in 4 years. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the story.
Is Walmart pulling out of China? The world's largest retailer appears to further downsize its footprint in China. Walmart reportedly closed 4 stores in mainland China on Tuesday, and a total of 80 stores in the country in the past 4 years. Among them was Walmart's first store in China, opened in 1996. But a quarter century after it entered China, Walmart is now at a crossroads. The company's revenue in China's hypermarket sector had fallen from top 2 in 2011 to 4th place, the lowest ranking since it entered the Chinese market. In 2021, Walmart's sales in China accounted for just over 2% of its global revenue. Walmart reportedly said they closed the stores because the leases expired. But many suspect that cutthroat competition from local players like e-commerce giant Alibaba may also play a role. In addition to Walmart, multinational retailers such as France's Carrefour are also struggling in China. According to media reports, Carrefour has closed 14 stores in China in the first 2 months of this year alone. In 2019, Japanese department store Takashimaya pulled out from China and planned to relocate its business to Southeast Asia. Economic experts told the Epoch Times that China's retail sector is suffering from a slowing economy. A jaw-dropping article from Chinese state media is sending shockwaves on the Chinese internet. State-controlled media outlet China Report published an editorial asking Communist Party members to have 3 kids. That's as the country is seeing the consequences of its one-child policy in the past decades. China's fertility rate, which was just 1.3 child per woman in 2020, is on par with aging societies like Japan and Italy. The article said that no party member can, for this or that subjective or objective reasons, not get married or not have children, nor can they have only 1 or 2 children for such reasons. The implementation of the 3-child birth policy is a responsibility and obligation of every party member to fulfill the country's population development. It added that admittedly some party members are no longer able to have children due to their age and health, but they can actively take an initiative to educate, guide, enable their own family members or people around them to actively and consciously implement the 3-child policy. The article told party members, never be oblivious and let your family or people around you remain unmarried or childless. And never be oblivious and let your family or people around you have only 1 or 2 children for whatever excuses. Numerous major Chinese outlets, including other state media, reposted the article before it got taken down. It also went viral on Chinese social media Weibo. One netizen commented, "This shocked my value system. So if you don't get married or have 3 kids, you should be condemned by history." Another lamented about how much pressure ordinary Chinese people already face. For one family, the husband and wife have to raise 3 kids and take care of their parents. That's 4 seniors. They have to go to work at 8 a.m., leave the office at 9 p.m. It strains their energy, and then there's a $1,000,000 mortgage that they have to pay. I should rather stay single. Yet another wrote, "I just submitted my application to join the party this October. Now I'm hesitating." And one netizen commented, "I never agreed with the centrally planned fertility policy. Having children is a basic human right, and no party or organization should have the right to use legal means to interfere with it."
Apple Airtags help you keep track of things. You just attach the AirTag device to your keys or your TV remote, and you'll see its location on your phone. But Canadian thieves are apparently using them to steal luxury vehicles. Police say they attach the AirTag to a parked car and track its location so they can steal it later. Since September, there have been 5 instances of AirTag-related car thefts in the southern Ontario York region. If you own a luxury vehicle, you may want to consider using a radio frequency detector to find potentially hidden AirTags. And the New Zealand government is proposing to ban young people from ever buying cigarettes in their lifetime. Starting in the year 2027, anyone up to 14 years old will never be allowed to legally buy cigarettes in the country. The proposed measures will make New Zealand's cigarette regulations some of the toughest in the world. Part of the plan unveiled today will also curb the number of retailers authorized to sell tobacco and cut nicotine levels in all products. Health authorities welcome the crackdown, but retailers and tobacco companies are expressing concern about the impact on their businesses. They warn of the emergence of a black market. The New Zealand government is planning to introduce the legislation into Parliament in June next year, with the aim of making it law by December of that year. And coming up, a colorful letter written by English author Charles Dickens is going to auction next week. The letter was written close to Christmas time and recounts a bit of drama surrounding a dinner party. And a group of conservationists in Brazil are helping to protect endangered golden monkeys by building a special bridge that'll help the monkeys cross over a busy highway. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow. Cancel culture has not only affected myself and MyPillow, but millions of you out there. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you for all of your support. At MyPillow, we not only have pillows, but we have hundreds of products, including my new slippers, bathrobes, sleepwear, and my new beds. We're offering the best gifts ever for the best prices ever. For example, we have this exclusive offer on the standard size MyPillows, regularly $69.98, now only $19.98 with your promo code. We also have the queen size MyPillows, regularly $79.98, now only $24.98 with your promo code. And we have the king size, regularly $89.98, now only $29.98 with your promo code. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive this exclusive offer.
A letter written by the author Charles Dickens to a prominent acquaintance is going to auction next week. In the letter, Charles Dickens writes about a dinner held in his honor that a good friend had been persuaded not to go to, much to his dismay. NTD's Neil Woodrow has the story.
A letter by Charles Dickens dated the 6th of December 1858 is set to go up for auction at Christie's in London.
This is a really splendid letter because it brings together Charles Dickens and one of the other great Victorian men of the age, Sir Joseph Paxton. Paxton is the man who built the Crystal Palace, most famously, but he was also a gardener, he was a local MP, he was an architect, he did so many different things.
Christie's expert says this letter is a cut above other Dickens letters.
And it brings them together around the theme of Christmas, which is, of course, nice, especially because of the Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens' most famous work.
Around this time, 163 years ago, Charles Dickens was in Coventry to give a reading of the Christmas Carol for a local charity. But his friend Paxton had been disinvited from the dinner that Dickens was attending.
And so he's writing in rather kind of colourful terms to express his frustration about why things have gone wrong, and paints rather a colourful picture of the local businessman who seems to have made a mess of the whole thing, a man called Whitton, who he calls blunder-headed Whitton.
In the letter, Dickens recounts his evening at the dinner and gives a frank assessment of the organiser Whitton.
If he could only find a hole big enough to put his foot in, he would unquestionably do it.
Christie's expects the 4-page handwritten note to fetch between £4,000 and £6,000.
It gives a flavour of Christmas, it gives a flavour of Dickens as in his public persona, and it gives that kind of flash of writing ability that you really want from Dickens, the kind of colour and enjoyment of a strange local incident.
It goes under the hammer in the valuable books and manuscripts sale at the auction house on December 15th. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
An environmental organization says the destruction of wetlands around the world could cause the extinction of dragonflies and damselflies. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, in a new report, says more than 40,000 species of the insects are threatened with extinction. NTD's Joy Felix has more on this.
Dragonflies and damselflies are found in wetlands like marshes, swamps and rivers on almost every continent, but their future is uncertain. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, or the IUCN, has just issued its latest Red List of Vulnerable Species. It says that more than 40,000 species of the insects are now threatened with extinction. The group says dragonflies need clean water to breathe and thrive, and they are declining worldwide due to agriculture and urbanization. The head of the IUCN's Red List unit says the importance of dragonflies is underestimated.
Dragonflies, especially in the larval stage in the water, are really key predators in freshwater systems. So they eat larvae of other species like mosquitoes. And as everybody knows, mosquitoes carry disease, malaria, yellow fever, and so on. So the dragonflies help with disease control.
Hilton Taylor says dragonflies are also an important food source for other species such as frogs, fish and birds. The IUCN says wetlands are just as important as rainforests for our ecosystems. Joy Felix, NTD News.
And the golden lion tamarin, also known as the golden marmoset, is an endangered monkey. There are only a couple thousand of them left in the wild, and they can only be found in one Brazilian forest. Local conservationists are alarmed about a recent drop in their population. They have built a special bridge for them to cross a busy highway. This will help the monkeys circulate over a wider forested area.
The Atlantic Forest in the state of Rio de Janeiro is the only place in the world where the golden lion tamarin still exists in the wild. Conservation efforts over the past few decades managed to increase their number, bringing the species back from the brink of extinction. But an outbreak of yellow fever in 2018 wiped out 32% of the population. Today, there are an estimated 2,500 golden lion tamarins in the wild. Conservationists were particularly fearful for a group of monkeys that had become isolated due to a major highway.
Genetically, that population would be isolated, and that's really bad. We are trying to create a landscape conservation area, protected and connected.
The bridge, built last year, has been planted with trees, shrubs, and herbaceous plants in the hope of making a natural corridor attractive to the primates. The vegetation is still young, and it will take time for the monkeys to use it. The executive director of the conservation project says a population of 2,000 golden lion tamarins should have at least 61,000 acres of forest. But the forest is fractured, cut up by pastures, roads, and towns. The golden lion tamarin has lost about 95% of its original habitat in Brazil, conservation groups estimate.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.